in that fashion, my direction would be important, I guess, to go over really quick, because my direction in life has always been true freedom. It has not been equitable freedom where I can just go and get something for free without me doing anything. Kind of what I'm getting at. That's not. I don't understand anything about that. Nothing comes for free. Somebody will always have to be doing that thing to get you that thing for free. So there is no such thing as anything can come for free. So with my understanding and everything of English law, the equity is completely fake. The money, it has no value except for the value that the person that you're exchanging it believes it has. So the biggest, and that's why when I speak of these things and everything else, I'm always on nature. I am not a religious person in any which way, shape, or form. My religion is nature and everything living on this planet. That comes first. It has nothing to do about anything else. What other people's beliefs are, they're welcome to it, and I don't challenge their beliefs whatsoever. That's just basically giving somewhat of a direction on what my mind has been looking for when I'm reading law, because we all have a direction, and that's kind of how we pick things out in law, is actually by how our actual actions, what we live and what we want from life is what we're going to find the answers to in the books, if that makes any sense, right? Like what you're looking for, you're going to find what you're looking for no matter what you're looking for. You kind of see what I'm getting at, just because of the matrix that we're in. You can pretty much make anything up, and if other people are gonna agree with you and create that thing and live in that fiction, you will have it. So in this day and age, it really doesn't matter what anybody wants, you can create it. And I'm just more on to creating and being a part of nature and the natural thing. So when we're going over the waste and the different options that are available, there's other options available for other people that are looking for things. I have not spent the time looking for those things because I've been looking for a way out for me to be self-sustainable and everything else, because of my belief that nothing comes for free. If I want something, either somebody else has to do it for me, or I have to do it in order to have it. So I'm on the that's kind of where my understanding and direction has been going, especially for myself, realizing what English law actually is which we're getting into today, is the waste and why it is a waste. So if English law made this so unlawful, and it's really against our natural true inheritance, our natural self that dies to be a part of our system, that right there tells me that everything about that is nothing that I want to be a part of. So the fictional equity that's attached to the lands that we granted, that this waste is also for. Because it's for the lands, and it's also for the equity attached, because we granted something to an equitable jurisdiction where their laws state, when you give somebody something like this in trust, they have to give you they have to pay the trust. They have to pay so much money into the actual trust for however the agreement set up for that trust, right? A trustee just cannot take it and prosper off it where the beneficiary doesn't get anything. You kind of see what I'm getting at? So because we actually got into this fictional group that decided to make this money, the value that you're going to get for exchange for letting them have that use is the same thing that enslaves everybody, right? So it will, in my opinion, it will have no value once people realize what it really is. So
that's the question, though, William. When people realise what it is, for thousands of years, well, for a good 1,000 years, as you know, they've been creating this holographic system where everybody believes in the equitable side rather than the lawful side. And basically, where does that go when people understand that? Because there's a device in place to try withhold people's ability to claim this our true inheritance, as you say. So what happens when that system kicks in? That makes any sense.
It does, and that's you'd have to in order, because if you're gonna have the option of waste, you'll already be out of the actual system. So you would actually be sui juris. You'd have your own lands exempted, and you'd be outside the jurisdiction of the English law, just basically like the City of London Corporation, right?
Everybody should be in that position, though, surely.
So what Andrew's saying is, what happens if everyone claimed donor and everyone escaped the equity system? What happens then?
We would have to create everything new. Like if everybody in the entire system, like if there was a
have new agreements.
Like if there was a referendum and everybody was told the truth, and everybody decided to give up their corporate person and claim their trust, we could just take on everything that's already being done today and create a whole new system with already what we created.
Mm.
Because you got to remember, the waste is you're doing it to yourself.
Yeah,
it's the citizens that have created it all, isn't it?
Right? I
understand that, and I'm totally on your side with everything you said on your initial, opening comment. I'm kind of on the same as that, because I've always worked hard. I've brought up 2 children, and I've always earned everything, in my own opinion, the labour that I've put into that. And that's the same principle as if I had lands. I'd be still doing exactly the same as you described in your words. And but obviously there's got to be, it's taken a lot of time and a lot of manufacturing of this system to get us in this place where we are now, where everybody just believes in the equity rather than anything else. It's quite easy just to write a check or to use an equitable device like money in paper format just to transfer equities. Everybody just is so in that system. So there's going to be some form of, point where the system rebels against the donor, because obviously it's going to be like a jealousy kind of system where, why are we still tenants? And you know what I mean? It's going to be that conflict. So I'm just thinking, how do we, in a way, get ready for that kind of thing to happen?
I'd say that's neither here nor there, because that's essentially saying, like, living as we are now is just another threat. It's their own fault. That if they don't want to look into the law and claim that, they can't sit there complaining about it when they have the ability to do something about it, but choose not to. So that's not really an issue there. And
I'm not really talking about the
can we bring this right back? But if we deal with, you got to remember that we're dealing in law right now. So, as we know, and why we're here discussing this, is because when we go up into a courtroom right now, do we have a choice? If the judge says that you broke the law, are they going to allow you to keep doing it?
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So when we look at the actual law itself, isn't the law the protection? Isn't the agreements that we make, right? You see what I'm getting at? So everybody that's in equity, they can get angry all they want, but they're getting angry at being your guardian and keeping
Themselves.
that trust for you, and they're in a lawful agreement. So they can't break that agreement, and if they try, then that's why we have the law, and they're in a jurisdiction and they have a nanny that's going to atone for them. If it's required, they will put them in jail. You kind of see what I'm getting at? So
yeah, the law is there to protect us. I understand that, but obviously people break the law.
well, exactly.
And
That's why we got to realize that like in Canada here, we have vast areas, vast amounts of lands. Some lands are in the middle of nowhere, and there's almost no one around. We have lands where you can be halfway, where there's not a lot of people, but there's enough people so you can still somewhat get easy access to the basic things that you don't want to be doing yourself on a constant basis, because let's face it, you can't do everything all by yourself doing it yourself, right? You can't make your own flour, your own sugar, all these other things that you're going to require, that you're going to have to barter and exchange with another jurisdiction for, right? Because now you're talking about other people now as sui juris, so they're not other so once you're sui juris, these people that are in fee simple, they're not other people. They're another jurisdiction. Everything they hold is actually not theirs. It's the government's, right? Because they got permission and a license from the government. They went and volunteered to the government. The monarchy gave those rights to the government, and it's not even in a trust. They're bound by a specific contract law. So that's why the law of uses and trusts specifically states that the government, they don't have a capacity for that, right? Because they don't have that option in law to even be that. But yet the government still has to purchase things exactly like the citizen does.
yeah.
Right? So when we look,
was the worst case scenario, really. It was only just a thought, future thought. I mean, not, as soon as you get your own land, I mean, obviously it'd be quiet anyway. There's no one doing this. But just in the future, like, would the system in general, if people, in masses turned out and did this, what would the reaction? Yeah, the law would be, we would be on the lawful side of things, but how would the monarchy side of things, when we start pulling the lands away, which is the surety obligation, how would they perhaps consider this?
well, it even states that in the law of uses and trust as well, because the actual monarchy is the trustee, right? She is the only one that has the authority to do whatever she wants to anyone under her, right? Under her, not above her, but under her, right? So that's all the government, all of her citizens, right? All you see what I'm getting at? Everything that's in English law is under her. She created it. So there's no one to go and smack the queen, right? Because she created it, right? But she's also your trustee. Yes. So by her being your trustee, right, it even says in the laws of uses and trust, I'm trying to bring it up here right fast. so I can actually read it. It says like, because I'd like to actually read this actual piece because it's powerful. The king cannot be seized to a use because there is no means to compel him to perform. For the chancery has only a delegated power from the king over the conscious of his subjects. And the king, who is the universal judge of property, ought to be perfectly indifferent and right to take upon him the particular defense of any man's estate as a trustee. Right? So, as we can see, the monarchy is the one that is bound by this law. It is not the government. The government is bound by the monarchy's law. You see what I'm getting at? And that's why it says, it keeps talking about chancery does not have all this authority. Well, chancery is equity. That's a corporate court.
So,
you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So,
William, so, like, when all the sovereign debt accrued sort of towards the 1700s and maybe just beyond that point, the South Seas Company came in and they underwrote all the sovereign debt for say 30 million. What position then? Because that's really, you know, the sovereign then put it.
But hold on a second. I got to stop you right there because we don't even have to go any farther. You already said the sovereign debt. The sovereign's
going to underwrite all our debt, and when you know.
Okay, but that's what I'm getting at. Why does the sovereign have a debt? The sovereign doesn't have a debt because the donor in his proper capacity. The sovereign has a debt because she created a system from the thing that you gave her a use of, right, and charged a whole bunch of people a fictitious amount for things she doesn't own.
Right.
So do we even have to go any farther?
No. The sovereign debt then is just basically equity.
Exactly. And she created it for the interaction between men and women of her subjects. Because that money only applies to people in that jurisdiction. That's why all the equitable jurisdictions now have their own sovereign on their bills, because the monarchy gave them the authority and now permission to act as their own independent sovereign countries. You see what I'm getting at? So if we follow the law and the monarchy statutes, and I mean if people actually started with the monarchy statutes, that Roughhead statutes, I forget the actual name of it, it's on omnipotence, and by just going to the back of the last volume, there's word indexes, so you can actually, by looking up certain keywords, you can find all the statutes that had anything to do with that. Like, once people start looking at how this stuff is recorded and indexed, we'll have a much easier time getting to the bottom of the matter. Because of all the jurisdictions that are combined, people think that this new jurisdiction made all of past ones obsolete. Well, it did, but only because you're a subject of it, if that makes sense.
Well, there's no need for it if everybody's a subject, yeah?
That's right. So
it's still in existence, but just it's sat there dormant because there's no more donors there to use that law for. Is that right?
That's true. Exactly, and same when they made the debt, like, because it's been, I believe it's like been 4 different land tenure systems since the start, but yet they all still apply if you're in that capacity for that jurisdiction, right? Like when you're in a municipal jurisdiction, which is everything today as the corporate person, all those other ones don't apply because nothing in there applies to a corporate municipal fiction. They apply to a different type of one. See what I'm getting at? That's why all they do is they change the government, but the people inside they're moving into a new jurisdiction as well, and they didn't even know it. Right? They did that in 1600s when they did their trading companies. They moved everybody into equity, right? With the Sedicki Act of 1666, putting them all, right, incorporating them all into the trading companies. And then you'll notice in 1688, then they release everybody after they put them into this municipal corporation, where now they have to release a corporate person before they can even return from sea. You see what I'm getting at? Because the new jurisdiction added a whole new level to it. All right, and that's why this waste part has even changed, because now that everybody is fee simple against fee simple cannot charge a writ of waste in the manner that we're speaking, right? And that brings us back to, how can a donor have a writ to waste, and what access to things that we actually have. So if we actually look at what jurisdiction is and how we grant it, right? We have subject matter jurisdiction, which is the land, and then we have being the corporate person, which is acceptance of it, right? So how do two separate jurisdictions work together when you get your lands back, because now you're in your own territory, like the City of London Corporation? Well, how does this?
Sorry, this is Ezra. Could I break in here for a second?
Give her.
I just want to put this in I'm a real simpleton type person, and I put this in a different spin. It's the same thing you're talking about. It's just a different way of looking at it. So everybody is due, something for their labor, what they do, because that's the energy of their life. And they're gonna, if you give something to someone else, some of your work, you just gave them some of your life. Okay, so basically I'm saying that there's an apple tree, and in the original jurisdiction, or whatever you want to call it, the man was on his farm and he had an apple tree, and he picked his own apples and he ate them, and he gave them to his family and ate them. If he wanted to give them to anybody else, he gave them to his neighbors and whatever else. He didn't sell them. He just gave them because he got them freely out of the tree, or freely from God, whatever you want, the Creator, and he picked it off, and it was free to him, and he gave it to someone else. But his labor that he used was something valuable because it was part of his life, and that's what they're trying to sell. But this is what happened. What happened was, when we get into this jurisdiction of the Queen and the equity and all that type of stuff, what they're doing, what they did is they basically, it would be as if this man now, instead of just picking off his own apple off his own farm because he knows how to pick apples, he goes and starts to work for some other guy on a big farm. And now he picks the apples for that guy. But see, the problem is now his labor is also for sale, because the guy who hired him, who's paying him to pick the apples, now owns his labor. So before he owned his own labor and could give it away freely, and now somebody else owns it because he's getting paid for picking those apples. And all those regulations that are that don't apply to the man when he's on his own farm picking his apple, now all of a sudden apply to him when he's working for someone else on their farm. And that's what they really did. They tried to take our labor and then sell it. But what they were really doing is
noting that by him agreeing to go work for that other guy on that other farm, the same law, or the same rules that apply to him on that farm now apply on his own farm with his own apple tree. Even that apple tree now is essentially part of that other farm, and he's due to, like you say, pay his labour on that one as well.
Can I just jump in here real quick? You got it with this farm, with this analogy that Ezra is bringing up here. It would be more like the guy gave up his right to lands, and now he's living on the same lands as that corporate farm that he has to work at. So he has to pay to live on those lands from the wages that he's being paid from the work that he's doing from the same person that owns the lands that you're picking that apple from.
Correct. So like he used to own the farm and he had the land and it was all, just his own land. And then later he sold the land. And so no, even though he still lives on that land, now he has to pay whoever he sold it to for the same things he used to do for free.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. So when we look at it that way, there's really nothing that there's not much in equity that person can do. You see what I'm getting at? Because they're so strapped. But
yeah, it's all owned or all sold away to someone else. Someone else owns that right now that he used to have.
That's right, and he only believes that that's the way it is. You kind of see what I'm getting at? Because
yeah, in other words, he could have hired himself as an independent contractor, done his own stuff and sold his own stuff, but maybe he didn't want to sell or get into commerce, which is buying and selling the free fruits of the land, and that's what happened. People started to sell things that they couldn't really own, and they were selling stuff that wasn't theirs to sell, and so they were taxed on that or regulated for doing that, and that's what's kind of like illegal. You can't take something that's not yours and sell it.
That's right.
You can give it away, you can use it, but you can sell your, evidently, I don't know what to say if that's the correct word, but you can sell your own labor because it's part of your life. In other words, it has every workman's, worthy of his hire or his labor, so he has, that's part of his life he's given away, and that's why an apple supposedly costs 25 cents, say, not because the apple cost anything, it was free, but the transportation of that apple and the picking of it, that labor that got it to where you're going to buy it, cost 25 cents.
That's right, and that's why the corporate person can't have the asset, but he can have all the equitable profits from it, because that's you getting paid for your physical wealth that you create for yourself, right? Because the corporate person can't take any assets, but they can take their equitable profits from it.
Yeah, that's called the usufruct, right? That's the use of the fruits.
That's right. So, but they don't ever own that thing because of the capacity that they're in. Now, the catch with English law is that those are your natural rights: life, liberty, and land. Because if you don't have land, you're always going to be subject to somebody else, where you're going to be in that position where you have to pay them to live on your land, and to then you'll have to work for them, right, to pick that apple that is actually yours, and then you're going to have to pay to get that apple that you were paid to pick for them. Now you kind of see what I'm getting at. So everything is,
because the land produces everything. Without land, I was looking at some other writing anyway, but I mean, in the old days, your land produced everything. So it produced your food, your deers, your meat, your fruit, and it produced your wood to build your cabin. Everything was out of your land. And if you have to go and sell those commodities to someone else, be able to, if you're not fairly exchanging it, which is really the key of this whole thing, is the fair exchange. That's what's left. Instead, they started to commerce and trade it, for money instead of a fair exchange. But anyway.
Well, we also, not really. Once you guys get deeper into this, you're gonna see that we've done it all to ourselves. Everybody wants all these libraries, everybody wants all these government services, all these things. And if the people didn't want them, they wouldn't have created them. And all those things that the government does, they have to purchase. So they require us, the citizen, to be unlawful to our inheritance, to create that waste so they can actually do those things you should be doing for yourself without the waste and the extreme expense, and having all these people doing these things for you that you should be doing for yourself. So it really
Exactly.
just
It's kind of like. Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's kind of like the Amish. You know, the Amish, when they say they want something built in the center of the town, everybody comes and brings their wood and brings their hammers and brings their labor, and they build it. You know, and it all was volunteer, given to their, what you want to call their little central government there for the use of everybody, instead of, you know, now where they would go and the government would be like a trust that would set up and everybody people instead of volunteering, and they would pay for it, and the other way around. In other words, everything that was volunteered or given is a free gift, or, you know, in exchange for the use of that place later on when it gets built.
That's right. And then they just attach this fictional value and cost to everything, right? They regulate everything, and they regulate the value of every single thing, right? So, as we can see, we've just given everything away, and we just stuck our head in the sand and just let a bunch of messed up people control things that they shouldn't have control of. But anyway, getting back.
William.
Yeah.
If you look at a mortgage, it's over a duration of time, and that living man or woman projects himself into the future, say 25 years, by hypothecation, and that creates 25 years then of equitable assets for the government then to create funds by bond. Is that correct?
Yes, it takes the individual to actual. If we weren't willing to give them our land and go and work for the right, and then because now that we gave them our land, now we have to pay to be on the land, and we have to pay for all our food and everything else because now we don't have any land, right? So we can't do it ourselves because anything we stick in the ground isn't actually ours, no. Right? Because the ground's not ours.
So then, so then, if that hypothecation of that 25 years of labour of that man or woman bonded to creating equitable assets for the bank, if they don't actually fulfil the promise of them 25 years, is that kind of waste? Because the bank or an insurance company will have to cover that asset?
No, you got to remember that the only thing that is wastable for the donor is what is on your lands and what damage they did to your lands, right? Because fee simple, they're not allowed to dig the ground, they're not allowed to cut a tree, right? So when we look at it in that form, right, they only got a license to exempt them, so another fee simple cannot charge them for that waste.
So,
but yeah, donor can.
So if they didn't take out a commercial insurance policy and say that the house burnt down on that plot of land, then that would be classed as waste, because the insurance company wouldn't be there to cover that, and then there'd be damage to the plot of land.
Depends how it burnt down. If it was done by natural causes, you cannot claim waste on the person that was holding those lands because they didn't do it. An act of nature did it.
Right.
So if the fire was because they fell asleep with a smoke in their mouth, that's an act of waste, right? If it was done because of lightning, no, there's nothing. There's nothing anybody can do.
Right. And that would that be recorded on the land registry then, if that occurs, and would that be recoverable at the point of reversion and claiming waste?
Well, if we look at the system, don't they document everything? Isn't everything required to be documented? So yes, if a house burnt down if a house was burnt down 20 years ago somewhere, you would know why it burnt down, right? Because they have to investigate all these things. Right? You see what I'm getting at? if we actually step back for a moment and look at the system and how they document everything and how they document it, we see that this is all accounting for the donor. There's just two systems that are pretty much exactly mirrored, but the process and the outcome for the donor is a completely different one for when fee simple are battling fee simple. So I think the easiest way to tackle this is actually in jurisdictions, because that's where really this lies, is because what happens when you get your own lands, you're in your own jurisdiction. So I think the confusion is coming from, how does somebody in one jurisdiction deal with another? And if we actually look at how other jurisdictions do it, like even between, let's say, Canada and the UK, or the Queen and anybody else, those are mostly all done by charters, right, or a treaty. So that's basically how two jurisdictions would work together. So because the catch about dealing with jurisdictions now is that because you're standing as donor, everybody in fee simple is your guardian. They're guardian to the lands you choose and to your natural rights. So that means that they cannot infringe or abridge your natural rights anywhere you go within an English law jurisdiction, right? They're bound by their laws. And if we look at the laws for those in reversion that are restricting the fee simple and the acts of legislation, we can see they are severely restricted in every which shape or form that conforms exactly to the ancient land tenures and the common law. So going into that a little bit farther, since we understand what jurisdiction, since I'm hoping everybody's kind of on the same page of jurisdiction here, I have a question to ask you guys. Does going into a court or getting a post office box in another jurisdiction grant jurisdiction?
I'd say going into the court, no. As for the post box, yes.
Definitely, yeah. First box, yes.
Okay, what?
I thought it was yes.
So everybody thinks that a post office box. Has anybody tried to get a post office box here that is a non-resident?
Can't get one in UK.
And what is required for you to get a post office box as a non-resident?
Well, you still have to give your commercial ID, your corporate ID for it. So, going to bring it back into jurisdiction of, municipal.
Okay. So would a deed of release, would a deed of release be considered the same thing as corporate ID?
Well, it
Yes.
would. It would.
It should show you different capacity.
It would show a different capacity, but not to get a post office box because they wouldn't accept it.
But you're going. You're going a little bit too quick though. What else is on that when you go and get a post office box as a non-resident? What do you have to put as a resident?
Well, you have to put your name, address, date of birth, etc.
Of your actual domicile, where you actually live, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So what jurisdiction?
The lands.
And we look at, and if we look, yeah, exactly. And if we look, location and how it's set up. By you showing corporate ID is showing that you accepted livery, right? By giving a residence is showing your jurisdiction. So if you put a residence down with corporate ID, you've given them a lot of information, haven't you? So if we look, if we look at how an individual in the capacity of sui juris, you would not be giving corporate ID. You'd be giving an exemption of corporate ID, right? And if there was any issue with them accepting your domicile on that document to get that post office box in a jurisdiction that is not yours, right? So you can pay for their service, so you can use their service and not grant jurisdiction, right? You can still use any service you want, right? You just can't grant subject matter jurisdiction. And so when we look at the heart of jurisdiction, we can see how this is going to correlate to everything that comes into play with this, including the waste and how we deal with people and everything else. Because you purchasing something from a fee simple. They can only give you a use of it. So if you're gonna be getting just a post office box, all you're ever gonna have is a use, right? You can never go and grab that post office box and take it home, right, and get mail at your house, right? It just doesn't work that way, right? So you're paying for a service. Now the catch comes in is when you're talking about things, right? If you wanted a Ferrari or anything, if you go purchase that thing from the fee simple, they can only give you that thing in the capacity that they have it. So my understanding is that for most things, because you're going to be in your own jurisdiction, and you would be, let's say you bought a Ferrari, well, sure, you'd buy that Ferrari, right? And you wouldn't be registering it in their jurisdiction. So, because your domicile says that you don't have to, and you don't need license plates or anything else now to drive it, and you don't need it in any other jurisdiction that you go to with it. So, when we're looking at it in the most strictest sense, that everything is registered to who owns the lands, right? So if you own your lands, all those things that you can actually write a writ of waste for, you can actually purchase them, as long as it's not lands, if that makes sense. Because if you go and purchase land and don't get exempted from the government, as soon as you moved on to it, you've now accepted livery by cession, right? We've got to remember, it has to be livery by cession, right? Livery of cession, right? You have to have them both, right, to complete the contract, because one is a contract and one is acceptance of it, right? Granting your lands away to another and accepting it as a use for free, right? That's the contract. So as long as you agree to that, you grant subject matter jurisdiction. So when we look at the writ of waste, everything that anybody has ever made from the natural resources, if you actually require it, the law says that you can actually write that tenant holding it, give them a notice, and once they don't comply with that notice, you can go to the courts and get the judges to attorn for them and get that asset seized into your hands, right? In the proper capacity that it is, because it's being released by their superior, which is their queen, which is the Queen's Bench courts, right? Or any ones that are acting in that capacity. Because some, like the United States, they don't have Queen's benches, as far as I understand, and other jurisdictions, like I think even Toronto, Ontario doesn't have one, and they're named something else, but they have it's the exact same. They have the exact same powers as what a Queen's Bench court in my jurisdiction is called. So when we're looking at all of this all together, we can see that the law restricts them and that they actually have to do it as long as we do the proper thing. And as long as we're not giving up lands and everything, because we're bound by that, as long as you have the deed of release to lands, you're basically in a capacity that is superior than everybody else. That's the easiest way to kind of explain it.
So the monetary system then, William, we'd still be able to access the monetary system, like using fiat currency and all that sort of stuff, or would it have to be lawful cash, lawful money?
Yes, in Canada we have the Canadian Ownership Determination Act, Canadian Control. I'll post the link right away, and that is basically the accounting for the donor when they're in reversion. And because there's such a, I just posted it in the room, there's such a large, a friend of mine was looking at this act, and he said that, because I didn't actually drill through all the accounting and everything else of the act because there's a lot to it. But basically, he was saying that as soon as the live registration of birth is registered into the system, $1 million gets put into that account. And then there's a formulation for all the natural resources for that jurisdiction that are wasted, where they have to pay every individual that has a live record of birth that is granted lands in that jurisdiction 12.8% of the annual natural resources consumed or used type of thing. Anybody that's an accountant it would be great if they would look at that and actually give me some more insight, because I'm not an accountant or anything else like it. Anybody that's planning on doing reversion, it's basically like doing your taxes ahead of time. You should be checking it all out to making sure that you're putting your stuff where it needs to be put. I believe like RSPs, I think some things in certain areas, when the passing of accounts happens, through the accounting formulations, some assets double, like ×4 and so on and so forth. So if you're one that has like fiat, right, like RRSPs and things like that are building, you can actually get it to increase even more. So you wouldn't want to take getting it, you'd want to lead those in so they roll over and quadruple. You kind of see what I'm getting at? So once you actually vest your lands and you get the writ of waste, the writ of waste is for the lands and the thing wasted, right? And everything wasted on it. So that's why that's why you get the equitable interest to it, which has to be law in order for them to tax you and for the government to do it. So there's a law in every jurisdiction, because there has to be a law for the government to do it. If there is no law, you haven't looked hard enough. Because there's a law for everything everything that they do, and they can only do what's written in the law, and they have to do it. So it's key that we remember that. So if you can't find it, you can force them that they have to prove it, right? Because of that exact same reason. So going into the money aspect and the writ of waste for things that you want and everything afterwards, by the time you're like 40 years old, it's over $40 million from my understanding. So if it averages $1 million a year, and you're out to be self-sustainable and doing your own thing, you're basically set for life. All the things that you're worried about, you don't really have to be worried about, because you're not gonna want to go out and have all kinds of lands. You're not gonna You're not gonna be having 5 Ferraris in your yard and a great big mansion, and right, because for one, you know that all those things that you're gonna go and buy from those fee simple is injuring your inheritance. And that's why I keep going back to the natural part of things, because when we actually get a true understanding that we can act in reality the way that the law is written, yes, you could pretty much live like kings and everything else, but that's also cause and effect. Now that you're acting for your true self, we have to start realizing the cause and effect, right? If a family walks to the bush and they're starving and they're going to die, and you have all kinds of food and you don't help them, chances are that they're going to attack you, because his kids are going to die. You kind of see what I'm getting at? So that's right. So when we actually start noticing that what we do is the exact cause of what happens next, I think a lot of these things will change, and people won't be looking to other people to do things for them and to have these things. We'll be looking to work as groups, because Jerry really likes doing this and he's really good at it, right? And Paul over here really likes doing that and he's really good at it. And Mikey over there, you kind of see what I'm getting at? And if we all just do what we really enjoy and give it freely with those that are doing the same thing as us, it makes a whole
paradise.
Never been seen before. And that's kind of where I'm trying to go at with my direction. I'm not saying everybody has to take that direction or anything else, but that's kind of why I talk and go in the direction that I'm always going, because I see that everything that everybody's doing when they're not acting in their own true capacity, they're giving it away to the elite, the City of London Corporation, the Vatican, right? The worst of the worst people are using that to manipulate and steal everything and to kill our planet and the people on it. So when we start actually changing those things and looking for a different type of life, because let's face it, this is the Matrix. We were taught this for almost 1,000 years now, and I think it's been well over 1,000 years. That there's a lot of different options that are out there, and we don't need to be really looking to society for a whole lot, except for the things that we don't have time to do for ourselves, right? Like getting flour and all that stuff and everything else. Because if we have lands, shelter, access to medicine, everything else when we need it, because we do, you can still go into the society at any time and get medical help and all that stuff, because there are guardians. So I honestly believe that this equitable system is just a temporary system, because it started off as complete tyranny and slavery, and this equity actually gave us our freedom with the choice to leave or not. Because when somebody is a slave and the slave master releases them, if the slave doesn't leave, the master still has to keep taking care of them. And I think that's pretty much where we kind of put ourselves in as mankind in this legal system, is we got our freedom, and it was a whole bunch of crap went on and everything else, and we all just got comfortable in a temporary system. And now those little legs that were made for this temporary system are buckling because it just can't hold the sheer weight of the waste.
Hey, William, you said that if the slave didn't want to leave the plantation or whatever, the plantation owner would still have to take care of him. And I've heard that before. He got his manumission papers or whatever and didn't want to leave him, so he became they call it free slave, voluntary slave. The man, since it was dangerous outside, if he went outside the area, everyone else would capture him and become a slave out of it. He lost his manumission papers or something like that, he got recaptured by someone else.
Better the devil you know.
Exactly. Can I add to that real quick? The Municipal Corporations Act made free man, by saying free man, is that you've actually accepted this democracy. Right? So you're free, but you've accepted to be a part of the group. So everybody that's saying free man is actually saying that they're accepting to be the corporate person.
Yeah, they're a free man with protection.
Yep.
Okay, but anyway, what I was trying to bring up was the fact that we had talked earlier about that statement that said in Queen Anne 5, where it says if you are your freedom has been determined and you get your release, and then you stay around or still have property or whatever, then you're a trespasser.
That's right.
So are these slaves trespassing? They stay?
Yes. Once you get your life estate determined, and that's where that ejection for May writ comes in, because now they're trespassing, right?
And that's all I'm familiar with that one.
It's actually in the forum in the writs on Omnipotent. I dropped it in there today.
Called ejection.
I'll drop it and just give me one second.
I was just trying to get the name of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a really messed up spelt word. And I'm probably not even coming close to pronouncing them properly, so don't take any of my pronunciation. Don't think any of them are actually... Because it's spelled E-J-E-C-T-I-O-N-E, and then the second word is F-I-R-M-A-E, and I'm going to post it in there right now.
Yeah, affirmative.
And from what the current equity bucks say that this is the current writ, but when we read Blackstone and those other ones, and in that actually are going into the actual common law, we see that the writ of decision is what they say is required to be the first action, which actually gets your gets your confirmation that you're the superior title. And English law, in English law, when you get a judgment granted, that's not the end of the procedure. You have to get that judgment. What is it called? It's enforced. So that seems to be where this ejection for May writ comes in, is right after, and you don't even actually put this one in your claim. You actually have it, from what Blackstone and Coke were saying, is that you actually have this sitting in a file folder, right there, ready. So it's basically, as soon as that judge says, okay, you're right, those lands are yours, then you file a motion. and you and you add in this writ for the motion, and it's supposed to get those lands immediately seized into the hands of the sheriff, where they go and do accounting of all the waste done on the land, and then it gets taken back to the court to be granted to the property owner.
And these can only be lands that no one else is living on, right?
No, these can be any lands as long as they don't have an indefeasible title.
Oh. So
any lands in fee simple are fair game. So you're basically talking about almost the entire world.
Wonder about Hawaii.
Yeah, I believe Hawaii is an English colony.
Because when I was just real quick, because I was thinking about this earlier, but I used to live in Hawaii, and the Hawaiian people had their own sovereignty, and then they got taken over by the United States, and they put them they locked up their queen and everything, and then took them into a trust, and they assigned these people called the Bishop's Trust, which used to run all of the Hawaiian lands, and those guys were making like more than $2 million each a year, and they had lots of power, because they got to make all the decisions about what happened with the Hawaiian lands and all that kind of stuff. And I'm realizing that that's basically the same type of a situation. In other words, they set up a situation where all the people were inside of a trust and had to listen to the trustees over the trust because they had lost their rights to their land. And then those guys, they didn't want to give it up because they were making so darn much money, living great, because they could take that fiat money and go and spend it and buy anything they wanted. So they didn't ever want to give it up, and they didn't want to teach the other people about it, because then they would come in and take their job, and it just got to be a greedy nightmare.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah. Law of domicile even explains how they transport the law around the country, around the world.
They transport the law? What do you mean they transport the law? Not each law, each jurisdiction had its own law. Jurisdiction means the law speak in that area. What law they speak in that area.
Actually, that's the myth that they want everybody to believe for this to keep playing on the way it is. Law is an agreement. And that agreement is bound by the individual at very first. Problem is that people don't realize that they can leave the group. As soon as you leave the group, you're standing as donor, and you can go and claim lands anywhere you want. That's exactly what this is going over that. To deal with how this happened, we have to basically go back to the 1600s of the trading companies and why they created them.
It kind of sounds like there's, because we know the world is just the world. There's really no boundaries. They're all fictional boundaries, of somebody's territory, whatever it is. I always call it the overlay, the territory that lays over the soil. It's like a highway, an invisible film that's all around, over the top of the land. Each person claims that particular territory that's directly underneath it. They don't really claim that land because no one can own land. So what they do instead is they just own the territory above the land. That's why they call it highways and stuff like that. You have roads on the bottom on the soil, and you have highways above, these mythical places called highways, because they're not really on the land, floating in the sky like the Jetsons or something. And those territories are around that area, and what they do is they control all that territory, kind of like a sales territory. Sales territory is, it's, say, in my case, Los Angeles or something. The law of Los Angeles. No one else is able to come in and sell in your territory. But you don't have anything to do with the ground underneath. It's just that you have that right to that area. That's, say, if it's a cloud, wherever the cloud is over the top of you on the ground, that's where you can sell. If you move outside of the cloud, you can't sell because that's somebody else's cloud.
Yeah, but that's all. But that's because you gave your. That's all It's all because you gave your land to somebody else and they created the law for that land. Right? Like, the law of the land is created by the one that actually has the assumed ownership of the land. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So,
hey, Miss C just joined us. This is Miss C, everybody.
Hi, Miss C.
Hello all. How is everyone?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Doing fine. Very fine. Thank you.
He's a really smart researcher.
Hi, Miss C.
So if we look at how English law transported itself around, we have to look to the law of domicile, which is actually called private international law and the conflict of laws. This is very important to read and to understand, because it completely goes with the land tenure and the common law, because it is strict common law and it's the rules of nature actually. So we have to realize that English law is a bunch of subjects that grant their lands to the monarchy for no benefit to themselves, and then they get a use of those lands for a fee. So everybody that's a subject of the monarchy, they don't own anything that they get from somebody else, from any other jurisdiction. So we have to look at in 1600s, English law was not everywhere on the planet. It was only on a small portion of it, right? It was already in India, right? And that's why they started the East India Company, which was the very first municipal corporate trading company, right? So this is the very beginning of this corporate equity that we see today in all our countries. And what happens is when one of those subjects from England took a ship and came, let's say, came to Canada or even to North America, because this before any other English subject was here, they started to trade with these inhabitants from these different territories. They got into relationships and everything else, and yet no English subject changed where he lived. They always stayed living in the jurisdiction that he came from. Once those people actually got the authority from the native people or the original people from that territory, they gave the land to those native people thought they were giving the lands to that individual. They weren't. They gave the lands to that king. So now if we look,
the king.
No, they gave the lands to the king because that person doesn't own them. So they actually gave the land to the king, but yet that individual thought that he was just giving it to that individual, right? Like if you came here across the right with them, right? You're a really nice guy. How about you stay here now, right? You're the only one that we want to stay here. You're welcome. We'll give you a piece of land. We'll build you a house, right? But everything that is on that land that we gave you and that land is not yours. It's your boss's, the queen, right? So if we speed the clock ahead now, another 50 years, now those original people on these new territories, now there's thousands of English subjects on these lands taking lands for virtually nothing, right? Or nothing at all. So now these original people have no land left. So they're stuck having to buy the land back from the fee simple, because that person is not going to give up those lands unless you're going to buy them back now, right? So as soon as that original person from the territory buys those lands from that fee simple person that doesn't own those lands, right? because he's only selling that original person just a use and a trust to that land, because that person cannot sell that original person absolute title to the property. He's only selling that fee simple's interest in that land, right? So now that original person goes and moves his domicile onto that land. Now he's an English subject. It's that simple. That's how it happened. Because that person didn't have to buy that lands from the fee simple. All he had to do was give that fee simple notice that he's taking his lands back, because he granted those lands to the king for no benefit until it's terminated, right? And because he granted those lands to that fee simple, the king now owes that original person a trust. He owes him the money for letting that subject use that property, because the subject isn't paying the original person. The subject's paying the king for the rent to be on that land, right? This is where that fulfillment and decision comes in, right? Because they're not the rightful owner. The government's taking the money for it when they're not the rightful owner, when you as the donor to those lands are the rightful owner. Does that make sense? So that's how this happens, is because we go and take titles from our parents that were by purchase, because they went and purchased that land. So we go, right, or when we get some money, we go and we get a mortgage and we go and purchase lands, right? So all these things are all just more adding to those agreements that we all sign, saying that yes, we're subject as fee simple, where we're acting as a corporate person and we're not acting in our natural capacity. So we don't have those natural rights.
Hey, William.
Yeah.
So I wanted to add in, because I found this out, and to me, this was like a crazy, great discovery. But the whole thing that you're talking about, I agree 100%. It's just that this thing, the first time that foreigner, or let's just say he's a native or whatever. I guess I can use the thing Hawaiian, right? The Hawaiian gives it to the English or somebody. Okay,
Yep.
With the English sitting on it. Okay, so we'll just say it that way.
Yep,
Anyway,
yep.
the first time that Hawaiian native gives the land to that Englishman who he wants to stay there, that was called the first registration. In other words, it's the first time that the Englishman accepted that land was into registration. And every time that the Englishman gives it from then on will be a deed, because he doesn't have the right to give title. He just had the right to give a deed after that time, because the original Hawaiian guy he's the original donor, and he always has the right of reversion to come back and get it.
That's right.
So
Correct.
Everybody who goes all the way down the line is always doing deeds off of the original title. So like if you had 100 acres of land, and that's the title of the whole 100 acres, and you can deed off 100 different chunks of it and even subdivide that. But each one of those you deed off is just a deed, and it has to someday return to the full title.
Yes.
Unless you actually break it off and actually make your own title, subtitle off of that, and then the guy would have a title with 99 and you would have a title with 1. But the Hawaiian guy always had the right to come back and get that property or redeem it, because, like you said, he was the original donor. Now, if he dies, then his sons and his sons and sons' sons can always have the claim to come back and get that piece of property. I guess
right.
What I don't understand is, are we all clear on that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I agree fully. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess what I don't understand is why the like us, whatever. Why would, if we claim some land, and it doesn't have to be land that our fathers owned or anyone else has owned. So how can we get that land, since we weren't that original Hawaiian guy making that donation, or related to the family of that relation?
Awesome question. If we look at how the actual system is set up, we'll notice that it's exactly like a game of Monopoly, right? when you join the game of Monopoly, you got to become a fictitious character. Everything on that board is fiction, right? So you can't take it with you when you leave. And when you joined, you agreed to throw it all into a pot with all the other people that agreed to do this thing to join the game, right? And the agreement is that when we're challenging title, we're not challenging the title to the actual land. We're challenging the title in a capacity. Who has a superior title to the land in capacity, not in time. We don't have to trace titles or anything else. It's basically who has a superior right and law to that land, the donor or the guardian. So these writs of entries, like the writ of entry, so decision in the post, that writ is only to challenge the fee simple because you're in a higher capacity, right? And because you have the live registration of birth, which is an indenture and is what is required, right? Because you take your land and you throw it into the box with everybody else, right? You throw it all into the box and then you get an indenture to play the game, right? Your live record of birth, right? So that gives you the pass to go and pick up your game piece, right, to start playing the game. As soon as you pick up that game piece, which is the birth certificate, and start acting as that game piece and moving around the board, you've now accepted everything a part of that agreement about giving your land and throwing it in the pail, right? And then, because everybody throws their lands in the pail, and the reason why is because you got to remember this was started in 1066. So all lands since then have been in fee simple, so it's impossible to trace titles, right? So all of these issues, when we actually start looking more in depth into each one of these stages, you'll be reading about how all this stuff is already taken into account in each part of the step. Like for the writ of entry, they're making sure that you don't have to show that your great grandfather that first joined the feud, right, had these lands and you want those exact lands back. That's not how this system is set up. So, and then same with when you release your corporate person, that's its own specific area. So a corporation can't force you to be they can't force you to be their employee and everything else. So every step has its own restrictions for that step. And you'll notice that all these issues that majority of the people are bringing up that they would like to bring up and kind of have a pissing match over, the law doesn't allow that. The law doesn't allow you to come up and start screaming and everything else, and the injury happened. There's a law that says you can't do that, and if it was done to you and you choose to bring it to court to get a remedy, they use a certain word for that. So they take all that anger and everything else, and it's taken away, and we're just dealing with getting you remedy for your injury. So that's why when we read farther into these writs and stuff, we'll see that all these things are taken care of. So there is no way that, for one, it makes it so other people don't actually really understand when judgments happen and why they happen, because they don't look in depth into how that certain process and law works for that situation, for that person, right? Because all law is a capacity, and everybody has one. So if I'm in reversion, then the law of reversion applies to me because of what I'm doing and what my actions are. The people in fee simple, they're bound by a different law because of what they've done and the agreements that they've made and where they put themselves. And that's why it's important that we always find the seat in law when we're reading everything, because everybody has a capacity in law and agreement to it, which can change how that thing is determined. And when we look at... Go on. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, because when I bring this, since, after I found the site, I'm so glad I found it. But when I was working through this before, in the modern way of looking at it, it's like all these people that are the fee simple are the people who have deeds. They have deeds of another, just an act of another, but they don't have title because they've never reclaimed their title, or they don't have the actual title to that 100 acres. They just have a deed off of it. So they can't say that they're the title holder. No, they're the deed holder of the title giver, and they don't have the actual title. So those donors are the people who have the title, and that's where it gets a little fuzzy, and I'll tell you in a second. But the donors are the ones who have the title, and the fee simple people are the ones who have the deeds in the modern. So what I was working on before was that you take the deed and you do what's called a counter deed, and that means like that's an endorsement. So it's like a check. If I write someone a check and it's made out to them, it's their check. But if they drop it on the street, no one else can cash it because it doesn't have an endorsement yet on the back. But if I was on my way to the bank to cash it or whatever, and I had already signed it and I dropped it on the street, then it would become a bearer instrument, and anybody could cash it. So what that would be the deed. Yeah, go ahead.
We got to define that a little bit more. We're talking about a deed of what? Because if we're talking about a deed as in a dollar bill, yes, that's transferable to anybody that picks it up. But a deed,
that would be a bearer. That would be a bearer deed. But no, I was talking about a real estate deed. That's a land deed compared to a title deed in property. And that's
the distinction that I wanted to get at here, because a deed poll you can't abandon. And because you only have a use of it, you can't force somebody else to take it. Right. So this is where the capacity part comes in, because fee simple don't have the right to do anything with it. They just volunteered to be a part of it. So all the assets you have as fee simple, to get rid of them, you just sell them.
Right, or assign them. Transfer.
Well, no, you can't assign them. You don't have the authority to force somebody else to take on its duty.
Oh, you can't assign your use?
No, you don't have that power. You can only accept for you. The government has the power to make its subjects accept things like that, but the subjects don't have that power. That's
normally when someone would sell like a piece of property, they would they had an interest, they had bought an interest in it from the title holder, the donor, and that person said, whatever, you can use this property, you have the interest. But he only has an interest because he doesn't have the actual title yet. He only bought a deed off interest. But he can't sell his interest?
He can sell his interest, he can't abandon it. So that's what I'm saying. If you had the deed to that land and you dropped it on the street, it wouldn't do anybody any good.
But if it was endorsed over to someone in like $1 and they could pick it up, then technically they would have the deed to the land.
Well,
isn't that why people keep deeds in their like safes and stuff? Because if you get a hold of the deed, which I know is not the title, but if they get a hold of the deed, then and it's endorsed on the back to say, United States of America or anyone, doesn't matter, but some kind of blank endorsement, they could pick that up just as if it was like a dollar bill. Have some type of claim to the land. I'm not saying they would win because maybe they don't have the history in the court and stuff, but they would still have a claim because were holding the subtitle.
Is your chat open? Like so you can see the typing in the room?
Yes.
Did you take a quick look at that picture? What you're referring to is the right of ownership and possession. The donor has the right of true ownership and possession combined. It's called a dual right. Droit, or however they pronounce it.
Right, so he has legal and equitable title at the same time. Possession and legal title.
Well, that's all it is.
Yeah.
He only has a use of it. You see what I'm getting at? So a true
I see
owner.
what you're getting at. I guess I thought legal title, and I know that word. I'm not trying to mess with that word, but I thought legal title was the actual title itself had to be issued by someone, probably by the Queen, right? She gave you out the title. That's like a patent. And then you have the use of it from the former owner. So that was the possession. So you have the possession and the legal paper or the title. So this is not necessarily a title, but it's a deed. And so when you have those two, now you have full, what they call fee simple absolute. But you're still.
Hold on a second. What is fee simple absolute?
Well, that's what I said. I thought it's the legal paper title with or deed with the possession.
No, fee simple absolute means you're seized of your true inheritance. The simple absolute is your warranty. By having the fee in front of it means that you're seized of it. You have to pay for it. Here, it's even. I post.
How do you? Didn't you already pay for it? That's how you got the deed.
Okay, but that's what I'm trying to say. The test in law, whether you're donor or only have a use, and use is fee simple absolute, right? So the test in law, whether you're donor or if you're in fee simple, is if you purchased it or not. Because a donor doesn't purchase, only fee simple purchase. And the warranty for the donor is annexed as the simple absolute. It's conveying the absolute warranty to the donor, not to the one in fee simple.
Oh, I didn't know that. So there's a term called simple absolute as compared to the fee simple absolute.
It's all one word.
Oh.
And in law, that's the warranty annexed to the fee. That's why it's fee dash simple absolute. Right? The dash is specifically separating the equity from the common law. The fee is equity. The simple absolute is conveying the warranty to the donor in common law, and and the law of property made everybody now in fee simple absolute. So you see what I'm getting at? So when we're talking about the waste and the writs, by anybody being in fee simple absolute means that they have a defeasible title, which means you can go into court as donor and take those lands and get it transferred and exempted as an indefeasible title.
Okay.
Right? So the first picture that I posted there, that's from Cocopon Littleton. Right? And that's basically cession is basically the fee simple, being seized of your lands, right? So it's explaining what is required to have a true title. Right, and then below is from Blackstone Commentaries. It's fee simple is in here. I'll just get the exact page. Be volume 2, page 106. And that's the biggest problem that we're trying to show people, is that the equity, the fee simple absolute, and the common law, the land tenure, are two different jurisdictions. And the citizens, the subjects, are only allowed the laws of the use. Once you give up being the corporation and do what's required for that, then you can be standing as donor and do these things. You can't do these things until any of these things that we're discussing, until you deal with the step one, and that's the releasing of the corporate, releasing all things to the corporation, that things that you have a use of currently, and then after that, then you got to release that capacity in law, right? And then you got a return from C, and that's forcing it into the courts because the governments won't give you a deed of release. And Koch, Littleton, all of them and Blackstone, once you actually understand how they're writing these things and stuff, and the fact that these writs would not be there if they actually did those things when they were supposed to, right? You kind of see what I'm getting at? If they did what they were supposed to when they were supposed to do it, these writs we wouldn't have to have these writs. So when we actually start realizing what law is and how what English law is and how it's written and what it's about, it's written for all the injuries and everything else that could be happening to all the different capacities, and we have to figure out which one is us and who the one that is injuring us, what capacity they're in, and what law is bound by them. Right? That binds them.
Okay. So some of these people that are turning back their birth certificates, giving them in, isn't that like giving in their claim form to their title, to their donorship, or is it just? I don't know if I'm saying that right.
No. I know what you're getting at. I did all that years ago. It's the worst thing you can do. Don't do anything. Don't tilt your hand. Don't send the government anything until you understand this entire process and have everything already done. As soon as you start sending stuff to the government and the monarchy or whoever else that you're sending things to, if they realize that you actually cannot support all of this and everything that we're talking about in the estates and reversion, they are going to come after you. And then you're going to go into court and you're not going to have the proof. And they are going to walk all over you. You are going to be in a very bad position. I've lost everything in my life. And I don't think people want to be in the position that I'm in and having to be able to do this process, because you have to pay the fee because you're in fee simple right now. So in order to get out of it, you got to pay the courts to get out of it, to start this ball rolling. And not until you're at a certain point can you start setting off these expenses and everything to your actual trust account. So
you have to pay for everything you used while you were in the system.
That's right. So because you're in fee simple now, if you choose to get out, you got to pay you got to pay the court costs to get the ball rolling, and until you get a deed of release and get recognized as the donor, you can't even try to set off against your trust account because you're not the donor yet. And that's why everybody keeps going to jail, because they're acting as a volunteer. Right? You're not in the capacity to do anything as fee simple. You don't own anything. You're not even the person on the live record of birth yet. Right? You're the birth certificate. Right? And until you deal with that first and terminate and dissolve all those agreements and that corporate person, you can't set off against your trust, because in law, you're a volunteer to it. So you have no right to it. Right? That'd be like me giving you a trust, then all of a sudden, let's say Justin wants to come and take it, right? Or wants to know all this information about it. Well, he can't. If he wants to come and ask you to have a use of it and pay you for it, that's up to you guys. You kind of see what I'm getting at? So he has nothing to do with my trust. So by me being a corporate person, I have no right to my own trust as the natural person in law, because this is law and there are jurisdictions in law, right? So we can't even be looking to a regular dictionary. We actually have to be looking to the law, and to the law written for that time. And these land tenures and everything was brought in the earliest ancient land tenures, which still apply today. They're just tweaked to be a little bit different. So the acceptance of the contract and stuff like that is completely different, right? So that's where these issues come in, is these jurisdictions are mirrored, and they're basically they look the same, except for there's slight different words. And and you don't do these actions in a court of equity, because what people don't realize is that even your jurisdiction is bound by you. So by you being a corporate person means you're in equity. As soon as you prove to a judge that you're no longer the corporate person, now you're in common law. You see what I'm getting at? So it's you that chooses your jurisdiction by your actions. The judge has his own jurisdiction. Your opponent has their own jurisdiction. So when everybody realizes that everything has its own jurisdiction and everyone and everything is bound by its own laws, and you have to have the law that binds them in their jurisdiction so that the judge can force them to do it because they agreed to their laws, not the laws of your jurisdiction, but the laws of their jurisdiction. See what I'm getting at? So that's where a lot of this issue is coming into play, and even with reading Blackstone and everything, because Blackstone is actually writing the entire history, like let's say that the section on waste, and that whole chapter on waste, he has to describe every capacity and every type of system that has been created and how it applied to each one of them from the start till today. So when people realize that whole section that's 30 pages is covering almost 1,000 years of law in every capacity that can come in contact with that piece of law, that we have to act, that for us when we're looking at it, that boils down to there's going to be a paragraph in there for what we really, really need. The rest is telling you different informations for like fee simple, like citizen against citizen action or government against citizen, because all these books are assuming that you accept this land tenure. So everything in all these books, we're looking for the exception to the rule. And that's why we're going to find that most of the time, it's only going to be a paragraph. And it's going to be an extremely powerful paragraph. There's one here on reversion. I can't remember which one it was. I've been posting so much. But it basically, it's from Blackstone, and within one sentence, it shows he actually explains the entire process of this entire thing in one sentence with keywords that if everybody understood those keywords that he was using, they would see that it is the entire process in that one sentence. And that one sentence is all of like 15 words.
That's what I saw when I was in that of the 6 and chapter 18 at number 5, where it only has one sentence about how you're supposed to take care of this whole thing, where it says, I'm looking at it here. It says, trying to get to a front of a sentence. They don't have a front of a sentence. That every person and persons, his, her, and their tenements or hereditaments upon or after the determination of such particular estates or interests shall and may recover. So it doesn't say like you have to go into a court, and do this and that. It just says that.
Hey, hold on. Wait. I want you to go to the very top of 6.N, chapter 18, number 1, and look to the far right. There's a footnote on the side of or a side note at the very top.
Differences referred to the Earl of Godolphin?
No, way off to the very side margin on the right. It's not actually written in the text. It's like a footnote, and it's going to say, what is it, 19 Car 2, chapter 6? Or something like that?
Oh, I just see, I'm looking at the top of the page, Queen Anne's chapter 6:18. It says chapter 18, 297 on the top of the number. And then in the margin, it says, differences referred to the Earl of Godolphin, his award to be binding. And then the next one under that says, after such award, managers for the United Trust be directors till new ones be chosen.
Look to the right-hand side.
That is the right-hand side.
Is it? Here, I'll look it up. I'll grab it here real fast.
There's nothing on the left-hand side. No margin.
So you're looking at chapter 18 though, right?
Here, I'll put the link in when I'm looking and make sure that we're talking.
Okay. Whereas diverse persons, the very first, like number 1. Are you looking at it?
Oh, so number 1, I see. I was at above number 1. I see that. Number 1, yeah, I see that now. Number 1, yeah. I was just at the top of the page.
The very first sentence, right after it says right of, what does it say? There's a side note right there. 19 car.2, chapter 6.
Oh, yeah, I see it. That little small thing. Yeah, I see that.
Yes. Do you know what that is?
No.
That's the Sedichy Act of 1666.
Really?
So,
wow.
And that's also on omnipotence. Here, I'll post that to you really fast because I know exactly where it is.
How do you read that?
You just learn to read it after you did that crap for so long.
Well, what does CAR dot mean?
Oh, that's the 19th statute of King Charles the second.
Oh, so CAR would be Charles. The abbreviation for Charles 2 would be the second.
And then the next would be the chapter that they're talking about.
In chapter 6. And 19 is the what? The statute?
The year of the statute. It was the 19th year, or the 19th year of reign of that monarch.
Okay.
So when you're looking up the statutes, they're all done by years. So the year is always before the monarchy name. So because they're you can find them in the statutes at large. I got a couple of them on the website. They're just really big. I haven't gotten a chance to upload them all.
So like the one up at the top, it says 17 GO 2C17. So it would be the 17th year, George the Second.
That's correct.
And then what's the C again?
Chapter
17. Okay.
And those are also on omnipotence as well. If you look in the statutes, I pretty much have them already all dug out already, and just those ones taken out. I just posted 19 car 2, and you'll notice that these monarchy statutes are different than the government acts of legislation. 19 car 2, chapter 6 is the Sedichy Act that the government wrote. This is what gave that authority.
But that's not what we're reading on the public side.
Well, the public is always looking at the government acts and statutes because that's the only thing that applies to the citizen are the government's acts and statutes. Only when there isn't a government law in place does the monarchy law, which is common law, take its place.
Okay. Yeah, because I noticed you had the Magna Carta like I've never seen.
Yeah, nobody wants that. They hide that one.
That is amazing.
They don't want anybody finding that, and that's the start of the English law, because the Statute of Westminster the First is directly right after that.
Oh.
That's because there was many Magna Cartas before that.
Yeah, I thought there was.
But they never abided by them. And matter of fact, what happened was, because all the Magna Cartas were because King William stole the lands and there was no remedy for them to get them back. So the 1225 Magna Carta was the last one that he actually abided by, and he made Statute of the Westminster the first, which is Dodonis, which created this fee simple and life estate situation, but he didn't put in a remedy. So the people were going to actually kill him because they had enough. Because all these, right? Because we got to remember that this is like in like 1280s.
Yeah.
And it was just like a brutal time, right? Like all the times in the Magna Carta, like this, like worst time of probably history because of the fight for freedom. And then it forced the king to write the Statute of Westminster II, and the very first chapter is the writ of Firmedin, and that's the very first remedy to get out of English law.
The writ of what?
Writ of Firmedin.
Firmedin.
Firmedin. Here, I'll type it in the...
Okay. Oh, okay.
Formedon.
Edon?
Yeah.
Okay.
And and that's called 13 Ed 1 Statute 1. And that's right here. I'm posting it now.
Oh, sweet. I love reading this shit.
As we can see, this writ of Firmedin has from all the different changes in the jurisdictions, because we went from a feudal land tenure to a different type of land tenure, and then we're at what's called a modern land tenure today. And because of each one of these systems was a different system, they had to write new laws and everything else for everything in this new jurisdiction. So Firmedin stopped being used when the next system came in, and then they had another writ for that jurisdiction. When they created the next tenure system, they created a new remedy for that jurisdiction. So that's how we have to follow. That's how, when they're saying in law, there has to be a foundation law to give it force or effect. And it all goes back to the Magna Carta, because the Magna Carta is the charter of the common law. I should say the Constitution of the common law. It's proclaimed, as you can tell. No one's ever elected the monarchy. So no one has ever given the monarchy the authority to even give the government authority over us. So it's all due to our consent and the creation of this 1600 thing, right? The equity in 1600s, because before 1600s, it was pretty much forced. But after 1600s, it's now us completely volunteering in every which shape or form. So we're actually accepting it now. Where before the 1600s, it was a tyranny, and you can actually prove it that way in law if you actually knew all this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Because it was like, even in from 1285 to today, there's been a remedy in law for any citizen to get out of English law.
1285 was what king?
King Edward. Edward the Longshanks. Edward the First.
Hey, that brings up a good question, William. When you get out, are you still going to be a citizen of America or Canada, or what will you be called?
Sui juris.
You'll just be sui juris?
Yeah. And it's spelled like that.
Yeah, I know how it's spelled, but I was wondering. So if someone came up to you and said, you know, are you American? Are you Canadian? Are you whatever? You'd say, I'm sui juris.
Yeah, I'm not any of those. I have my own lands, and right, because that's
you could say you're a William.
Well, no, that's a part of the interaction between men, to know what jurisdiction they're in, to know what your limits are with the person you're talking to. And that's why it's always, hey, how are you? My name is this. I do this for a living, and I live here. Right? You see what I'm getting at? Everything in life is based on what your beliefs are and what your law is for you. So when we do that right as soon as we meet each other, then there is no reason, as long as we're not ignorant, of the laws for you and the person that you're speaking with, and you understand this right off the hop, then you know what things would be an injury and not for both of you. So now you guys can interact together in harmony. Right? We've just forgotten about this. Right? And then they made a whole new system, right? So they could just run amok. Because this, like, equity is for the City of London Corporation, the Vatican, and the Lord Spiritual and Temporal. They only have the equitable use of things. They control nothing else. When all the donors come back from C, they lose everything. See what I'm getting at? So when we look at the big picture on how everything's kind of where we are today, the donors have all the choices and the fee simple have all the rules.
So could you restate that again? I'm sorry, about if when the donors come back at C, like, you mean when they come back from the C jurisdiction?
Yeah, when you come back to life, because you chose to work in a capacity for another, and because you chose that, everything you do, you're actually a robot, because you can't really make your own decisions right now, can you? Because you're forced to be the corporate person. You have to go get a driver's license. You have to go insure your car. You have to pay the taxes on those lands, right? And that does not end until your corporate person dies, right?
Right. So the reason you have to give everything back is because it was never you earned it while you were under the employ of those guys. It was none of it was actually made by you.
But you got paid. You already got paid. You're the one that decided to take on that asset. And if you, like, let's say you decide to have two houses, right, and only live in one, and let the other one completely fall apart, and you pay for it all out of your pocket and everything else, and try to scrounge just to keep it so you got the house, right? You're choosing to take that loss, when instead you could have kept the house maintained, right? Kept a renter in it, so it's bringing in profit, right? To bring you profit, so you have money to get out when you choose to get out. You see what I'm getting at? Like, it's all about accounting on who owns what and in what capacity. Is really all it boils down to.
But technically, you could get out of the system and have nothing.
Well, you have to have nothing to get out of the system.
Well, I mean, nothing to fall back on or anything until you can have your.
Oh, for sure, exactly. That's right. Because let's face it, our great ancestors. Like, look at how we got here today. Right? Like, look at how people tried to settle North America. They came in ox and cart and through swamps, right? Look at the things that we have today. We have solar panels, we have 12-volt water pumps, we have water filtration, right? We have wicked canvas tents that are only like a few hundred pounds that you can put a wood stove in and live in at minus 30 below, right? You didn't have to worry about hiking in heavy metal tools and making your own handles because you just didn't have the space to bring the handles and everything else too, right? You kind of see what I'm getting at? Like, when we look at the benefits where we are today compared to our ancestors, it's almost, in my eyes, it's kind of like a cop-out where somebody says they can't really do it because they don't have the money, right? Like, we could all pick up an axe, we could go cut down a tree and make a fort and live in it if we had to while we're vesting our estate and so on and so forth, right? Like, when we look at what our ancestors had to do just to survive, for what we have to do for the short amount of time to survive until you can get access to your true assets and liberties, it's a walk in the park. You kind of see what I'm getting at? Because if you're completely prepared and everything else at the time that you do it, your worst case scenario that you're probably talking about is like 6 months type of thing, and then you're everything's going to be done. So you pretty much just have to set yourself up so you camp at the right time of the season, right? And get everything set up so you plan it so it's not going to be hard on you, right? So you can go and camp when it's nice and warm out instead of what I'm doing right now where I'm stuck in a camp when it's minus 20 below out.
You're talking about camping because what you're saying is you're standing on the land that you're claiming, right?
No, you're not standing on the land. You're actually standing on their land, and you're deforced because you're out of possession and you're out of ownership and you're out of the fee that's attached to those lands that you own. So you're injured in three ways. You're injured because you're out of possession, you're out of ownership, and you're out of the income that you can get from it. Your food and everything else, right? So that's kind of the catch. That is the hard part to this, is that you can't have anything and you can't be an owner of lands and all these things to be able to do it, right? You have to. Pardon?
Sorry, what about if your father or something has things like that, and you're, the son, and you decide to do this? The father, he can still have stuff and go to his house, or no?
Oh, you can stay with anybody you want, yeah. I've been doing this for 10 years, extensively. I've lived it thoroughly for over 6 years. I have not been a part of the corporation or this library by session thing. I've been attacked by every form of government you can imagine. Because of the belief that people have on what the system is and that they actually own things, I'd suggest not telling many people in your family and stuff unless they can actually comprehend some of the things. It's destroyed my family life. I almost have no friends left except for a very few that actually have stuck through to see and read the things that I've read to understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. It seems that because people don't understand it, they attack you. So, and because they're your friends and family, they're not going to attack you, they're just going to abandon you.
Yeah. We know it well, don't we?
Yeah.
So this is really a game of poker that we got to learn, that we got to play, that we can only talk to the people who actually understand it. We can't be sending things to the government till we're prepared. We got to understand that we can't access the trust or set off against it until we've gotten pretty much your lands back. So a lot of the things that are going on, or a lot of the reasons why our friends and family don't believe in this and can't believe in it, because of what a lot of the gurus and stuff are portraying, that we can get our trust and do all these things as a fee simple when we can't. I've got thousands and thousands of pages and everything of proof that we will never be able to access the trust or anything until we deal with these main factors, and that's being the corporate person, because we're not even our true self. And that's the biggest factor, and that's as soon as you start talking to friends and family that have never read anything like this, and all they do is watch the news and see people like Dean Clifford and Robert Bernard saying the things that they say, right? And also like Winston Shrout and things like that, where they actually get, where the news people will give them these ridiculous amounts of time to show how ridiculous they really are, because they're not understanding that there's actually two different jurisdictions, and it makes people believe that this is completely false, and why they won't even dig whatsoever to look at the truth, right? So that's why I only have a few people that are still around, because they were actually witnessed those things, and they were actually looked at some of the books and things like that. So they're like, okay, yeah, there's no way that guy's a liar, because he was a judge in the Queen's, like the most superior judge of the Queen for 20 years, right? That guy's not wrong. He wrote the law, right? So certain people will kind of see these things, but most won't, and it'll just make our life hard if we actually just keep throwing this stuff around and everything else. We have to start realizing who our opponents are, what capacity they're in, what knowledge they have, and what they can actually absorb and accept. I guess that's the biggest part to that, because it's really hard trying to fend off all of that while trying to learn this and do it at the same time. Because the government will come after you, your friends are going to be giving you shit, your family's going to be harping on you because you're not working and doing all these other things, right? But then they don't realize by you going and working and having a mortgage is you making your slave pledge to the monarchy, right? And the fact that everything has to do with money and everything else just makes it even worse, because that's what everybody lives for. So it makes it a really hard thing to get people to start understanding and looking at. So it's important that people take their time and not get themselves into a boiling water, right? A frog in a pot and starting to boil it. You don't want to be putting yourself there.
I was surprised to see the word executor and administrator in the old stuff there. Queen Anne's, I think it is. And is the executor, that's a fee simple position too?
That's correct. Because an executor and an administrator is not acting in their own capacity, are they?
Yeah, I understood that. But they seem to respect that a lot. But it seems if you are the executor of that estate, then technically, you have the right to, deal with it. And in other words, if you were an executor of a normal estate and some child came back and said, hey, I have claim to that, then you would be able to grant that, or tell the court at least that, the real child who's the rightful heir to this property that I've been executor over has come back, and, he's a living man or whatever, and he's come back to claim the estate, and then the executor turns it over so he doesn't remain an executor de tort because he's not the rightful person to be there. It seems like that would be able to help you in a way.
Exactly. Now, that's where faux and decisor and those things come into place, because you'll notice that the administrator is the faux the one that takes the fee for the trust. And the decisor is the fee simple individual that didn't give the lands back once you've asked. On omnipotence, there's the very first two on the popular downloads. The land tenure explains basically the entire history of the land tenure from the start till today. The uses and trust basically goes over all the entire truth to the common law for how the uses and trust started and where it pretty much is today. Blackstone commentaries quoted those are two books directly quoted from Blackstone, where he's talking about these in the commentaries specifically for the donor. They're extremely powerful books. They're going to blow you away. Point to that is in the law of uses and trust, and I just posted an important thing into the room here, and this, if we notice, it's always talking about decisor, abater, intruder, and things like that. So that's from the law of uses and trust. So we'll notice that the government doesn't even have the capacity to have a use or a trust. And it also goes in that the government has to do things by purchase. right? And also that it doesn't have any right to compel somebody to discharge their trust, and so on and so forth. And then we get into the interesting parts, which was on page 10, decisor, abater, intruder. Now, to help with that, I'm going to jump into Kokot upon Littleton now, and I'm going to post that now. And we're going to see what he says is a lawful or pure inheritance. Here it is well put in the disjunctive, lawful or pure. For every fee simple is not lawful. A decisor, abator, intruder, or usurper have a fee simple. All right, so what he's saying there is a decisor, abater, and the intruder have a title by fee simple. Right? And that in order to have a title as a decisor, abater, intruder, or a usurper, you have to have it either by purchase or by descent. Right? So if you have a title by purchase or descent, you fall into one of those four categories. Okay? So if we look at if by wrong, which he goes into next, if by wrong, then either by decision, intrusion, abatement, or usurpation. You notice that the only real things that change to those words are the last few letters, right? Like decisor and decision have two different meanings.
And one is the act and one is the person doing it.
No, they're both on what the person's doing, but if we look at the definitions between the two, the decisor is somebody that has something that he's not supposed to have. But a decisor is someone that's holding something from somebody that's wanting it. Right? So if we actually studied what the true difference is between having it by a right or by a wrong, is whether or not the donor is asking for these individuals in these capacities, right? Whether you're a decisor, a abater, or an intruder, or a usurper, right? If a donor comes and asks one of those, right, with a proper notice to give his inheritance back, and they don't, they fall into the wrongs. Right? Then you see, because of fee simple, because we're with fee simple, I'll kind of streamline this right now. We're dealing with decisor and with decision, because the fee simple don't take anything as a trust, so they're actually defeating the trust, and that's us injuring our own trust, right? Like it's. And that's what makes it unlawful. And Koch gets into this in extreme depth in that book. And what makes the injury, because you can't hurt yourself, you can't see yourself punching yourself in the face. So you can't injure yourself. So the injury comes when you're holding something in a capacity that you of another, right? For another. And when they come back, you're not, and they give you notice, and then you don't give it. That's the injury. So decision is the injury because they're already injuring their inheritance. But fee simple cannot waste and injure their inheritance with another fee simple because it's not theirs, right? So when you're in the capacity as the donor, and you claim lands from a fee simple, right? They're in decision.
If they don't get back.
Okay? Well, all fee simple are actually, because they didn't give it back, but also because they're injuring what is actually rightfully yours. Because if we take this to the next step, in jurisdictions, everything that is a part of that group belongs to everybody in that group. So this is how the English law mimicked natural law. So all the donors, they're in their own jurisdiction. So all the donors in natural law, right, and the law of nature is we don't own anything, and we all share equally, right? So, but each individual can choose to give up their own individual piece and join a group, right? And all that group now works inside of what that group decides what's law, right? So now natural law is no longer the foundation. It's the foundation law, but it's not the law because the group has made its own law for the group.
That's
right?
like the East India Company did, right?
Exactly, and that's why they created them, to transport their law around the world. And if we notice, the Law of Property 1925 makes all the governments that are now on the lands that are de facto and that are illegal because they had no law to give them the authority on the new lands, right? They had to create a law to give them the authority, which is the Law of Property Act 1925, which makes everybody into fee simple. And Section 3 is any lands that are held in trust has to be held by 2 or more people or a corporation. And then if we look at the Municipal Corporations Act, Municipal Corporations Act by 5 and 6 William, Chapter 76, we see that that's where they created and gave all the authority that the governments have today so the Law of Property Act could apply. See what I'm getting at? So
yeah, absolutely. Question. Well, when I trace back the genealogy in my family, they have part of them owned letters patent. How's that play into the whole system?
Letters patent. So you would have went back probably only just a few generations then, correct?
Yeah, in the 1700s. It was.
Yep.
They actually owned New Albany, New York. My cousin had letters patent on New Albany.
Because we got to keep in mind always the years in which that thing happened. Will tell us the jurisdiction that it was in. So if we know that this corporate equity jurisdiction was created in 1600s, right, and by 1666 it was fully enforced, everything from then on is always going to be in the new equitable jurisdiction of letters patent, fee simple. And that would have been through the statute of uses, which I can give you that. I can show you that now.
Oh.
How does the statute of uses relate to the uses in trust, real quickly?
Because it actually, through hereditaments.
Oh, okay.
Hereditament is everything that's attached to lands. And it includes everything, your rights, including your rights and your liberties. So by them creating hereditaments, that's you granting your rights and your liberties and everything attached to those lands, including the lands. So when you see hereditaments, make sure you realize that that's everything. So that's why you notice that everything that we're dealing with in donor law, hereditaments it's always going to be land and hereditaments. Because just the land is not your rights in English law. Because
is that all your ancestors, all the property, like she was talking about, all the property that was owned by her ancestors?
They would. No, that's still a patent. It's still a deed of just a use. But every individual can get different exemptions with the use if they choose, right? Like if we look at this system for what it really is now, where they don't actually own it, right? And they've just assumed authority over the lands because nobody's actually actually given them anything. They just assumed it and made the contract and acceptance to follow in exactly the exact same way that we live. So if that right there should set off some fireworks. So they made the contract and acceptance the way we live. So the actions that we do is accepting their agreement, even if it's has a different definition to us, right? Because it's in law. The law writes the definition. So that's one of the biggest problems that come in right there, is that people take their assumption over what the law defines it as. And it's always a law because it's an agreement. They have to define it. And if you can't find it, you got to keep looking, because it'll be defined somewhere at some point of time between 1066 and now. And that's kind of the bird's nest to this. And with jurisdictions and everything else, and you add it all together, and the new systems added on top of each other, and how all that plays out, it kind of makes a really big bird nest for the people that can't get access to what the real foundational rules to these things are. Because once we have the true foundational rules to them, it makes it really simple. So if we follow the uses and statute of use, we notice that it actually, at the very, it goes into it about free and common sockage and everything else, and how they brought the remainders and everything else, and how it attached to the new law of property in 1925, and so on and so forth. So basically, that's tracing the use, how they created the equity from 1535 on, because they had to make the statute of use before they could create the sea trading companies, right? Because there has to be a law that gives it force or effect, or there is no force or effect, right? There has to be originating law. Right, so it has to come from the monarchy. If you can't find a monarchy statute that's given the government that force or effect, then there is none. But you got to be careful, because there's a lot of laws out there, and you can be actually overlooking one that's actually there, like so many have, because so many believe that there is no contract between us and the government. But when we understand what the contract is and what the acceptance is, everything we sign as that corporate person is accepting the agreement. So the biggest catch is the use. The use is always after the monarchy, because we granted to the monarchy created the government and gave them the powers. And then we went and volunteered to the corporation, not to the monarchy. So as citizen, you don't even have an agreement with the monarchy. Your only agreement is with the government. And everybody thinks that their agreement is with the monarchy, when it's not. And that's why there's also two-tier governments in every English jurisdiction. Somebody acting in the capacity for the monarchy has to sign off on those laws for the government in order to pass them. It's the same everywhere, even the United States.
So the government that was granted by the monarchy, those are like the private vendors that are doing all the privateering and all that kind of stuff.
The executors and directors that you're reading in the Sedekey Act and stuff. Because you got to remember, they're not holding anything in trust.
What do you mean?
What are they holding it in?
Yeah, where is it?
The government has gotten the authority granted by law, not by trust. Right? Because the monarchy,
the monarch.
That's right. Because the monarchy created the government by an act by their act, right? And then gave them the authority to create law with an act. But they only have to but they only have that right in equity. They only have for the use of things, right? For that assumed jurisdiction.
So the monarch is the one who's really holding the your state
Your lands, yes.
lands.
Well, the monarch can only hold the lands and the titles and the peripherals, whereas it was by agreement from the Laterans with the Vatican, right?
Yes, because the Lord spiritual and temporal is the Vatican and the livery companies.
Mm-hmm.
And the livery companies, like the guilds from the City of London Corporation,
Yeah.
they were created in 85 AD and before. So the City of London Corporation and those guilds are older than English law itself.
Right.
Right? And that's why also, if you notice, this is all also playing into the C jurisdiction, which is equity, which is the livery by session, which is livery companies and working as a corporate person for those livery companies, for those guilds in the City of London Corporation that are now all over the planet. Because the City of London Corporation, the guilds, they regulate all the law for all the corporations under them. So the seamstress guilds, they deal with all the pricing and everything for all the fabrics. You kind of see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So each guild actually is the guilds in the City of London Corporation is what runs your stock markets and everything else.
Yeah, they're the money changers, price setters.
They control the equity, but only the equity, only the use of things.
And you were saying it was 856 or something?
85 AD.
85 AD. Okay.
And that's even right. If you go to the City of London Corporation website, it tells you all about it.
Oh, wow. I'd love to read that. Huh.
I'll give you the link real fast.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. Well, I was telling Eplo that I had traced back my genealogy. And it went way, way back. But you get to see, when you trace your genealogy, you get to see where the monarchs and who was running things and who was running what land. It's real interesting.
Yes, and when you actually look at the Doomsday books, it gets even crazier.
I don't have those yet. I haven't gone through those. I don't know where to find them, actually.
The first Doomsday book was in 1086 or 87. And then the modern Doomsday book was the transfer of all the estates to the equitable jurisdiction in 18 something. So we can see how, and even the monarchy, if you look at the monarchy, it used to be the English monarch, and then between 1600s and 1700s, it went to the British monarch. Then if you notice, Queen Anne was the very first monarch of equity, and why she had to write 6.Anne, chapter 18.
Yeah. Well,
right?
it was... Right,
so,
okay.
Because you have to remember, every new jurisdiction, they have to write in the new law for those people to have access to it. Because if their sovereign doesn't write their law for their jurisdiction, they don't have it.
Right. So it's like writing a new will each time they do it. Sort of.
Pretty much, yeah. And every time
closing the corporation and writing the new charter.
Pretty much, yeah. It's the only thing that changes is the workings of the government. The people underneath it don't even notice the change.
All right. But they can have profound effect.
Oh, extremely profound effect, yeah. And it shows in the law because people didn't even realize that they got their freedom and that they were made into corporate dead fictions. They had no idea that they actually got transferred into a completely different system and had to accept this new system in a completely different fashion. It wasn't disclosed or nothing. That's just the way the English law is set up. And that's even stated in private international law. The civil law doesn't change because the people have to get their government to make those laws for them. Right?
Uh-huh.
Jurisdiction, because you as donor get an agreement with the monarchy, so that agreement only applies between you and the monarchy. When the monarchy gets into an agreement with the government, that agreement is only between the monarchy and the government, no one else. When the citizen gets an agreement with the government, it's just between the citizen and the government, no one else.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
See what I'm getting at?
Oh,
So
yeah, it's the separation of it. Eppo and I have been talking about that.
That's right. So there's actually 3 levels of trust.
Uh-huh.
There's one between you and the monarchy, then the monarchy between the government, right? And then you as citizen and the government. Because everybody after the donor only has a use, because when we give our lands to the monarchy in this trust, we retain absolute ownership in it. So the monarchy only has a use. So in trust law, how that works is a trustee has to assume ownership of the thing in order to act as owner of it for the beneficiary. That sound familiar?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that means that the beneficiary granted the authority away to another, right? So that ends up making it so the monarchy only has a use, and she has assumed ownership. So if we put assumed ownership on one side of a piece of paper, right, and the use on another with a line between it, she can only give the use away if it's attached to a fee, because the monarchy is in an agreement between the donor and her that when he gives that land, the monarchy has to, right, because he's giving the monarchy a use for a fee. So the monarchy has to pay the donor for that use, right? Because of trust. Because when you give something to trust for somebody, they take assumed ownership of it to make it prosper, right? Because it has to prosper, because it has to pay the trustee, and it also has to pay the trust, which is the donor, right?
Right.
See what I'm getting at? Because if you granted something to somebody else, and because you have to pay them to take care of this. So if they weren't forced to make that trust perform, and the trustee was just going to suck just from the trust, there would be no trust left, right? Because there's all you're doing is taking from it. Nothing's ever going back into that pail, right?
Well, that's Social Security, straight up.
Yes, but that's something completely different. That's an agreement that the group made as a group, so they can make anything legal if they want. You kind of see what I'm getting at?
Well, yeah, but I mean, the mother created the trust. The Secretary of Treasury is the trustee, and you're the name holder. So it's basically the same, similar to that, but it's a secret and silent trust, whereas there are multiple beneficiaries, and the reason they come in as the priority beneficiary is because they have the agreement with the government.
Well, that's because you signed. That's because you signed deed polls, granting that over to them.
Yeah, without really knowing it, but
That's
yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
there is actually only one beneficiary, and you're a sole beneficiary.
Well, you are until you take charge of that.
No, you are forever, because you got to remember that in English law, your rights are attached to your lands, so that's an individual right. That's not a group right. So that's why your live registration of birth is in your name, and that's why it's an indenture in your name, and it's a deed poll to everybody that has signed it.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
See the thing?
That's yeah. Mhm.
Because you didn't sign it, and because you weren't in the capacity to sign it and grant that land, right? Those your parents granted it in trust for you, and the government accepted it. So that's your indenture that you have to remit, because you got to remember that's where this two estates from one comes from, because you only grant the monarchy a use with an assumed ownership. So she can never, that assumed side, that can only go to the person that's named in the indenture, right, that granted it to the monarchy, which is, right, the deed, right, the indenture, right? It's a deed to her, but it's an indenture to you, right?
Right. Okay. Got it.
So that it's an individual named trust, so it has to go directly to the one named on it. And that assumed side, the only thing that's on it is your name, the donor's name of the thing that was granted to the trustee. The other side, that's the use. That means that they can use anything, that thing that you granted to them, they can grant it to anyone else as long as they only have a use for a fee. That means that the trust got actually transferred to them, but not the trust itself, just the warranty to give it back when demanded, right? So the monarchy granted it to the government, right? And then the government grants it to the citizen with a license to break the law, right? To commit the waste, right? That we were just talking about, right? So
is that what you call it? The waste? That's the waste?
That's right, because everything that the citizen does is not in his own capacity. So that's them. So that's all the use part, right? So the license is them granting you the exemption to do that unlawful thing. There's other people that just hopped in, and I'm just telling them that we're in the chat.
Hey, before we get too far away from that, you said that, we had that agreement with them, that they were supposed to pay a fee and all that. Have you ever found out where that original type of agreement is?
Yes.
When we granted it, they said they would agree for a fee?
Yes, it's annexed in that land tenure book, and also Blackstone commentaries. That's here. Read. You got to read this.
Just in general, it's not like one particular place. It's just kind of a general.
Oh, it's everywhere. It's the foundation to the trust law, to English law. And he goes into it right here.
That's good. He's great.
See, a fee, therefore, in general, signifies an estate of inheritance, being the highest and most extensive interest that a man can have in a feud. Simply, without any other adjunct, or has the adjunct of simple annexed to it as a fee or a fee simple, it is used in a contradiction to a fee condition at common law, right? Or a fee tail by statute. Right? See, the common, because
I guess you just got to know how to read it.
Well, you got to remember, this is Blackstone talking. This is the hard part, and why it's so hard to discuss law now, because if you notice, the very first thing, right, they talk about is the feud, right, and is the highest and most extensive interest that a man can have in the feud. So this is the start of English law, right? And then he starts going into, right, and when the term is used simply, right, without any other adjunct, right, so now he's starting to take you into the next layers of the tenure, right, because there's like 3 or 4 different tenure systems that are an entire history. So he's got to explain all of this that has to deal with this area in one shot. So he's combining it all in there, all in once. So that's where it kind of gets tricky, because Blackstone's assuming that you've already read the previous chapters in his book, and you understand the feudal land tenure and how it changed to I call it the ecclesiastical land tenure, and so on and so forth, right? So, and getting back to this, and then it says importing an absolute inheritance, clear of any condition, limitation, or restriction to particular heirs, right? And heirs, as soon as you see an heir, that means fee simple. Somebody with a use. Successor is somebody in the capacity of a donor, right? So we can see right now that he's putting the limitation and restrictions to particular uses, right, that are descendable to the heirs in general, right? But so now he's talking about to the fee simple. So they descend in title with the heirs, right? You see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
So he's saying right now. So he's saying right here, a fee tailed by statute importing an absolute inheritance. That right there is the only, right, because the assumption is that you accept it. So they don't want to get too much. He's not going to get too much into this, right? So now he's talking about an absolute inheritance. And if we go into the next, because we can find out what the inheritance is now, right? Because now he's talking about inheritance. So let's, I already found all this. So
can I ask you one quick question too? Because
Sure.
you said heirs and fee simple, but inheritance is what we're actually due, right? And I always thought the word heir was like from inheritance. I guess they're different. Not really.
Yes. They are. They're a different capacity in law.
And inheritance is more like herediments in a way. I'm just kind of playing with the word here, but I always thought an heir gets an inheritance.
Yes, but there's 2 different types of inheritance, because remember in fee simple, you can only give what you have. So if you only have a use, when your dad, let's say your parents pass on and you inherit the land. Well, if they only had it in fee simple, you only inherit a land in fee simple. You didn't inherit the absolute title to that property because they didn't have it.
Right. That's very much like the deed thing I was talking about. You only inherit the deed or the interest in using the land, but you don't inherit the title to the land.
That's right. Because deeds are exactly that, a deed poll, you accepting it as trustee, where a release is them releasing all the rights to it. So now you have absolute ownership to it because you're the only one named on it.
And this is stupid, I guess, but what do they call deed poll instead of just deed? Because it's just like a deed roll, a paper, right? A deed paper.
Okay, I'll get into that right next.
Sorry, I'm throwing things at
No,
you.
that's okay. We can hop right into that next. If you notice, I posted about the inheritance next. There's another picture in the room. And that
Yes,
is...
real quick. I don't know if it's quick. When it says particular heirs, what does particular mean? What is that?
That's dealing with capacities in law. When you're in fee simple, when they're discussing about the heirs and descents in title, that's there's a whole bunch of exemptions. Like if you notice if it's always the first male born, that if there's no will and so on and so forth, they get the inheritance and stuff like that.
Okay.
That's only in English law. In natural law, none of that's all. It's nothing like that.
All right, thanks.
So it's basically separating the different things for the people inside that jurisdiction.
Okay.
This inheritance is from volume 2, page 210 in Blackstone Commentaries, and it actually goes right into the inheritance. Because if you notice that it starts off right off by descent, right? Because you got to remember that we have to when we join the English law, we descend in title, because we've actually lowered ourselves in law to be the lowest entity on the planet by being guardian to anybody that's acting in their natural capacity, not in fee simple. So when we look at other, I guess, jurisdictions that are not a part of the English law jurisdiction, that have been coming to English law jurisdictions and saying their law has no force or effect, they're actually right. And this is where we're going to get into that now. Because everybody that we have to descend in title, so we're actually giving up our rights and liberties for corporate rights and duties in exchange. So we're not actually giving them up, we're kind of putting an agreement between them and saying that we're going to abide by this before we abide by that. So that's why we have to, that's one of the reasons why we have to get rid of the corporate person, because that's accepting all these group laws. That is all this crap that we're reading now. So the doctrine of descents deals with the law of inheritance in fee simple. And as you can see, Blackstone even says it's of the highest importance, right? Because it deals with the law of real property in England. And all